Welcome back to Thousand Year Personalities. Today we're setting sail on an epic adventure to uncover the life of Christopher Columbus, the man who dared to cross uncharted oceans and altered the course of history forever. Love him or hate him, Columbus remains one of the most talked about figures in history. His voyages paved the way for the age of exploration and the eventual globalization of the world. But who was Christopher Columbus really? And what drove him to risk everything in search of a new route to the riches of the East? Grab your maps and let's journey through the life of one of history's most controversial explorers. Christopher Columbus was born sometime between August and October 1451 in Genoa, a bustling port city in what is now modern-day Italy. His birth name in Italian was Cristoforo Colombo, but history would remember him by his Latinized name. Columbus came from a family of modest means. His father, Domenico, was a wool weaver and a tavern keeper, while his mother, Susanna, managed the household. Young Christopher had little formal education, but growing up near the sea filled his imagination with tales of adventure and trade. As a teenager, Columbus worked as a sailor on merchant ships that traveled around the Mediterranean. These early years gave him valuable experience in navigation and seamanship. By his 20s, Columbus had ventured as far as the Atlantic, sailing to places like Portugal and possibly even Iceland. Around this time, he began to develop a bold idea. What if there was a faster way to reach Asia by sailing west instead of around Africa? Most educated Europeans already knew the Earth was round, but no one had ever attempted such a daring route. Columbus believed it could be done, even though he drastically underestimated the size of the Earth and the vast expanse of the Atlantic. In the 1480s, Columbus began pitching his plan to various European monarchs. First, he approached the Portuguese king, who rejected him, as their focus was on navigating around Africa. Undeterred, Columbus turned to Spain. After years of lobbying and a series of rejections, Queen Isabella of Castile and King Ferdinand of Aragon finally agreed to sponsor his voyage in 1492. The timing was perfect. Spain had just unified and was eager to compete with Portugal for global influence. Columbus promised riches, new lands, and the chance to spread Christianity, a trifecta the monarchs couldn't resist. And so, on August 3rd, 1492, Columbus set sail from Spain with 3 ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and the flagship, the Santa Maria. His crew of about 90 men was a mix of seasoned sailors, adventurers, and criminals, pardoned in exchange for joining the risky expedition. The journey was fraught with challenges, storms, food shortages, and growing unrest among the crew. After weeks at sea with no sight of land, tensions ran high. Mutiny seemed imminent, but Columbus managed to keep his men in line by promising they were close to finding land. Finally, on October 12, 1492, a sailor aboard the Pinta shouted the long-awaited word, land. The ships had arrived at an island in the Bahamas, which Columbus named San Salvador. Believing he had reached the East Indies, Columbus called the native inhabitants Indians. In reality, he had stumbled upon a completely unknown continent to Europeans, what we now call the Americas. Columbus explored several islands in the Caribbean, including present-day Cuba and Hispaniola, before returning to Spain in 1493 as a hero. He brought back gold, exotic goods, and captives, fueling Europe's imagination and ambition. Over the next decade, Columbus embarked on 3 more voyages, each with the goal of establishing Spanish colonies and finding a direct route to Asia. These journeys were a mixed bag of successes and failures. While he helped open the door to European colonization in the Americas, his governance of Hispaniola was marked by brutality and mismanagement. His treatment of the indigenous peoples was particularly harsh, involving forced labor, violence, and the spread of deadly diseases that devastated native populations. By the end of his 4th and final voyage in 1504, Columbus's reputation had taken a hit. He returned to Spain in poor health and faced criticism for his failures as a governor. Though he was still respected as an explorer, he never achieved the wealth and glory he had hoped for. Columbus spent his final years largely out of the spotlight, living in relative obscurity until his death on May 20th, 1506, in Valladolid, Spain. He died convinced he had reached Asia, never realizing he had encountered an entirely new world. Columbus's legacy is as vast as the oceans he crossed. His voyages marked the beginning of the age of exploration, leading to the exchange of goods, cultures, and ideas between Europe and the Americas, what historians call the Columbian Exchange. However, his expeditions also ushered in centuries of colonization, exploitation, and suffering for indigenous peoples. Today, his life and legacy remain deeply polarizing, sparking debates about heroism, morality, and historical impact. And that's the story of Christopher Columbus, a man who dared to sail into the unknown and change the world forever. If you enjoyed this deep dive into his life, be sure to give this video a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to 1,000 Year Personalities. Hit that bell icon so you never miss an episode.